What's going on, guys? I got my beater shoes on. That means I'm ready to work on my car today. I'm gonna be taking the turbo off so that I can get the cylinder head off in the next video. I'm a lot more prepared this time. I did this a few months ago because I was trying to change the turbo out, and then I ended up selling the turbo kit that I got because I really wasn't happy with it. And now I have a new custom turbo kit that I should be able to pick up any day now. And I'll show you guys what that looks like. I just wanted to document the whole thing so that if anyone else is changing their turbo, they have a really easy video to follow. I recently took the valve cover off just so I could inspect the damage from the money shift. I'm gonna save those clips for when I get the whole cylinder head off so that I can show you what happened to the valves as well. These are my favorite days when I have nothing significant on my agenda besides just working on my car. Here's a little sneak peek of that money shift damage, but stay tuned for a future video. I'll go over everything that happened. First steps are just to jack the car up, so just make sure your e-brake's on and your car's in gear. We do need this front right wheel off, so make sure to loosen that up before you jack the car up. I was waiting for AAA to come for like an hour and a half, so the battery died, and I need to get into the trunk to get my key for my lock and lug. I can't get the hatch open since the battery's dead, which means I need to climb all the way in here to grab this. You know what? That really wasn't that bad. I think I'm just being dramatic. I finally got the car up. You do want to get the car as high as you can. It should be high enough. This is probably like, I don't know, maybe like 1.5 feet. Nah, probably like 15 inches off the ground. Wheel chocks are always a good idea. We don't really have any, but we do have wood laying around. So I had to go find my belly cover. So this guy is the first step. You got to remove this guy from the bottom of the car. There's just a bunch of T25 Torx screws, and then you pull this guy out. It's really easy, but mine's been out since the last time I did this, and I just never bothered putting it back in. So without that belly cover, this is what you will be seeing. Everything is just exposed in here. The next step is to remove this wheel well trim right here. You just need to remove the lower portion of it, not the upper portion. There's just a few more T25 Torx screws right there, there. There's a bunch of them. Then you can pull that right off. Now I'm removing the turbo outlet pipe. This pipe right here goes up to the turbo and carries the charge down here to the intercooler. Right here you have these two supporting screws that bolt into the oil pan. I actually read that these are supposed to be T25s. On my Golf R they're T30s. So I got those two little guys out, and now I need to just work on getting all of my hosing off. So this guy, this is aftermarket stuff, so I just need to loosen up all of these clamps. So it's very straightforward, but it is going to vary a little bit from car to car. I covered up this inlet for the intercooler so that nothing gets in there, particularly because I'm going to be draining my coolant from right here. The next step is to get your engine cover and your intake off. I don't have an engine cover, but the intake has to come off, and so does this diverter valve hose that comes right here all the way up front to the diverter valve. But typically you would need to remove this connector for the MAF. Mine was already disconnected so that I could get my coil pack harness off to get my valve cover off. So you can keep this plugged in right now. We're just working on the intake. You just need to disconnect this clamp for this hose for the diverter valve and just leave it over here. You really don't need to take the MAF sensor out, but you can. There's just two little Allen key screws in there. I'm just gonna leave mine in there for now. It's just one less thing to have to keep a track of right now. I'm just loosening up this guy and taking this clamp off. I mean, I can just leave all of this together and just lift it up all at the same time. but I do need to loosen the clamp that actually clamps onto the turbo down there. And it's a little tricky to get to. I was able to get to that from up here, and now I should be able to just pull the entire thing right off. Yep. Maybe not quite. I'll have to just do it in 2 sections here. Nope, or not. And I'm just taking another Ziploc bag and putting it over the turbo inlet right there, because I do not want anything dropping into that turbo. With this EVOMS intake, I also have a heat shield back here, and I'm taking both of these T30s out of. Now we can actually see the turbo. I'm gonna drain my oil and my coolant now. So I recently got this guy that'll catch all my oil and contain it nicely. So I can't remember what the stock size is. I have this magnetic ECS drain plug, and it's 14. So this might be a bad thing. My magnetic drain plug does have a bunch of shit on it. Alright, that's good enough. I'm just gonna plug that back up so that it doesn't trip all over the ground, and I'll torque this down properly later. But for now, I'm just gonna tighten it up a little bit. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this thing. I have this other smaller one that's for my coolant. I just need to undo this clamp right here and then pull this hose off. So this is the lower radiator hose. That'll get probably like half of it out. I had to bail out of filming that because I got coolant all over this lens, really all over the entire camera. Only partially came off. I was gonna pick up this Miata tomorrow as a second car, just so I have something to drive right now, and then I was gonna, you know, modify it later on, like in a few months. I even discussed with the guy that I would send him a deposit and he was gonna hold it for me until tomorrow, and he just texted me that he sold it. Back to square one. I have to start looking again tonight for cars. It's such a waste of time looking for these cars. I already had that Miata on my insurance plan, so the whole thing is just really messed up. So I did finally get that hose off. So here's the hose, a bunch more coolant poured out. Actually, as I let it sit here, a little bit more is coming down. I'm gonna get that back on and put that clamp back on. I have that button back up. Now we gotta go underneath. So there's 2 things under there we have to remove. Next, you have to disconnect the dog bone mount. You don't have to take the whole thing off. You just have to loosen this side or this side so that you could have movement with the transmission, because you need to be able to slide the transmission forward, you know, rotate it forward, so that you can get the drive shaft to unmount off of the transfer case right here. So what I like to do is just disconnect this back one. It's easier than doing both of these. Plus I had an issue with the helicoil in this one anyway, so I don't even want to touch that one. So I'm just gonna loosen this one. So now I can get some movement right here with the trans, and I can take the drive shaft bolts off. Here is the drive shaft, and right there is the bolt that you have to take off. There's another one, and then there's another one up out of view. So there's 3 of them. You're just gonna need a pretty long extension to get up there. You can get to this with a breaker bar and an extension. You just have to spin that wheel over there to get to the next bolt. So the whole drive shaft will spin. You get to the next bolt. Just do it one at a time. Pretty easy to do, but it'll be difficult to cord it. These are 10mm 12 points. You want the parking brake still on, but you need the car out of gear. Okay, car's out of gear. So I can reach over with my left hand, grab this wheel, and spin it. And as I'm spinning it, you can see this rotating. Now that bolt's in a good spot to take it out. You might want to remove this bolt. It's a 13 millimeter for the center support bearing for the drive shaft. It just allows more movement of the drive shaft. I'm actually gonna try doing this without doing that. At this point last time, that's what I did. Instead, I'm gonna try to go ahead without it. So the drive shaft will slide towards the back of the car. If you pull it and just pull it towards the back of the car, it will slide back there, maybe like that much. And that should be enough to get the drive shaft to come off of the locating pin on the transfer case. And you usually will have to pry on the engine to get that to slide. There we go. So without removing these bolts for the center support bearing, the drive shaft can only move to the right till about right there. But if you remove that center support bearing, you'll be able to get that way farther over to the right, which will help getting the downpipe back in. Like I said, I'm just gonna leave it like this for now. When the time comes, I will remove that center support bearing. This next step is a little bit tricky just because there's no room to really work in there. But this heat shield right here that's above the CV boot needs to be removed. And there are two 8 millimeter Allens. So here's from straight underneath. There we go, there's one of the 8 millimeter Allens. And there's another one right there. Hopefully you can see. I got both of these guys off and the heat shield is still hanging on because it's on studs. It's just on the studs, but you can pull it straight off. And this is what it looks like. There's two holes. Right there you can see the two studs that it was sitting on. You can barely see the farther one, but you can see the close one right there very easily. So that is pretty tricky to get off, but if you have a really long Allen or just a perfectly sized extension, you can get that off. My metric wrenches only go up to 20 millimeters, and these OT sensors are probably like 21 or 22. So the closest one in metric is a 7/8. So I got that bottom one off. Now we just have this top one up here. So I got that O2 sensor off. I put it in a little plastic bag just to protect it. Getting the downpipe off might be a little bit hard with this heat shield here, so I'm gonna take this heat shield off first. Along with it is these coolant lines. I will need to take these clamps off. You need to take both of these off. This is the evap hose, but I already had these off so that I could get this valve cover off. There's just a clamp on each one. It's pretty easy to get off. Well, this one's actually a little tough. There we go. You can unplug your coil packs now. You don't have to take the coil packs out like mine are. It's just that I was compression testing my car and taking the valve cover off and shit. There are two bolts back there, and then you just have to worry about unclamping everything. So back here there's two 18 millimeter bolts, and it's impossible to get a camera back there and be able to see it. I can show you the locations once I get it off. Forgot about that light up there. So I got these two bolts off from right here, and now that jiggles around, I just have to remove this little bracket right here that holds this hard line in. It has a 5 millimeter triple square, and then this hose, that hose, and that hose. Then the whole thing will come right off. But yeah, a bunch of coolant's probably gonna be in here. About to be a bunch of coolant. Wasn't too much. This one might have some more. I'm gonna have to put the camera down to get that one. Okay, I got that one off as well. This one does have a bunch of coolant in it. There's nothing I can really do. Can't really get anything underneath and like catch this, so I'm gonna have to just kind of dump it down there. My drain container is down there, so I can actually hear it catching it for the most part. Yep, it's mostly catching it. It's dripping all down the subframe, so it's kind of like spreading out. That does kind of make a mess, but that container is doing its job. But now I have everything disconnected right here, and I can just slide this out. And I'm sure some more coolant is gonna come out. Yeah. There was a lot of oil on the back of this, which there shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that's just from having my valve cover off. Because I never really tightened it back down. I just kind of have these screws still backed out. Most of them are still backed out. I think I just tightened like literally maybe 2. So hopefully that's all that's going on there. Now there's a ton of room to work back here. You can see my downpipe right here, the exhaust manifold right here, the turbo. Tons of room now. I got all 4 nuts off, and one of them took the stud with it. The downpipe is just being held on by the studs now and the clamp down there. I'm getting this exhaust clamp off. Nothing is holding the downpipe on at all anymore except for the studs. I'm gonna slide it off the studs from the top. So it's completely off the studs now. It is hitting the drive shaft. So I just want to note that I was able to do that without dropping the center support bearing right there. Now we can actually work on the turbo lines and then take the turbo off. The only issue is it's getting kind of late, and I don't want to be too loud out here. Plus it's kind of a pain working in the dark. Not sure how much more I'm gonna do tonight. I'm definitely gonna tape up all this stuff so nothing gets in there. The dirt, debris, bugs and shit. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I live pretty close to a car meet that goes on. I can hear people just revving over there. It's funny as shit. Okay, I'm gonna call it a night here and then just resume in the morning. I'll see you guys in the morning. Okay, it's now the next day. I slept in because I'm sick, so it's kind of the afternoon right now. So the next things you have to do to get the turbo out, since there's not much clearance right here between the valve cover and the windshield cowl, the windshield wiper cowl, you need to remove the windshield cowl and this top piece of the firewall, and then we just need to disconnect the oil and coolant lines, and then we're good to go to pull it out. Right here in the passenger side wheel well again, you'll see the turbo right up there. So we got oil supply, the one that starts all the way up there further, and as this one is the coolant supply, and then this one right here is the oil drain. Before that's all dripping on me, I might as well disconnect the N75 valve first. So the N75 is right here. It's mounted onto the turbo right here. The connector on mine broke the last time I did this, so I actually put a bunch of tape on it to make sure it didn't come loose. There's a little clip that holds the N75 wiring, so just pull it out of that so you can actually get the turbo out without pulling all this wiring out with it. Alright, I got that. Once you get that out, it'll just hang really low here. I'd come up to the top of the car and pull that up so that it doesn't prevent you from getting the turbo out. everything gets stuck on each other in there. Alright, so there you go. So that comes from the coil pack harness. It's just an extension off of the coil pack harness. Right there you can hopefully see that this harness is broken. There used to be a little black piece right here. It no longer locks onto the other harness. I'm gonna see if I can just get a new one, or maybe I'll tape it up again. I don't really want to tape it up just in case I sell the car, but we'll see. On the turbo itself, there are a lot of little mounts and brackets that hold the lines in place. So right here is an example of one of them that I'm talking about. So that one holds the oil supply line in place on the turbo. There's also the spot right here that holds the lines in place on the block. And this one holds, it actually holds both of these lines, both of the oil and the coolant supply lines in place. So you have to back that out. You actually can't get to that with the turbo still installed. So that's why you can't completely remove all of the lines first. So what you have to do is just disconnect them on the turbo side and then pull the turbo out, and then you can get that off and get these out. So for now we can get started with the oil lines. You can take the oil drain line off completely. So we'll do that now. So we'll start at the bottom, right here. The last time I was doing this, a bunch of these little screws got their threads all jacked up, and I wasn't able to reuse them. So I just kind of threw this back together using anything. So I'm using like one Allen head and then one 12 point. I was just trying to get the car thrown back together just to be able to drive it, and I knew I was going to be doing this turbo install a few weeks later, so try not to judge me too hard. Triple square, I meant a triple square head and an Allen head. I think both the stock ones just have Allen heads, or triple square heads. I reused this gasket. It was really shitty, but I reused it and there was no leak at all. So if these gaskets look pretty straight, I would definitely just reuse them. I'm gonna get the other side of that line on the turbo. While I'm down here, I am gonna remove that 5mm Allen that's on that bracket that's holding the coolant line onto the turbo. That one right there. All right, here it is. It's a 12mm triple square. Crush washer on either side of on either side of the line is a crush washer. So you might lose the bottom one. I was able to sneak that bottom one out. Alright, so this line doesn't want to go anywhere. I think it is mounted on the turbo. I was just being really stupid. I disconnected the bottom part of this oil drain line, and then I disconnected the oil supply line, thinking it's the same line. I just made a stupid little mental error. The oil drain line is definitely the most annoying one to do because it looks like this on both sides with two 5mm Allens like that. So there's another one on the other side of the line on the turbo. It's right there, this closest one. And as you can see, so this is the line right here, this one. And as you can tell, it's really hard to see, to get a line of sight on those two little screws, and it's like nearly impossible to actually have access to both of them. So there you can see the one 5mm Allen right there, but the other one you cannot see. It's a real pain in the ass, guys. There's like no clearance up there. It took me a ridiculous amount of time to do it the first time. I'm gonna set a little timer right now, actually. I'm actually setting a timer right here, a little stopwatch. Let's see how long this takes me to do this. As I'm pulling it out, my wrench got backed up against the top of the axle right there, and it's stuck. It's completely stuck. My only hope is that I can maybe stick a little screwdriver onto the back of it. Thank God I had just enough room to hit that little tab. So now I can tighten that back up and hopefully get that thing out. All right, I just got it. Let's see what we're at. We are at 26 minutes. That's actually not that bad. First time I did this, it was definitely well over an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So this guy's hanging now. I can pull it out. If this gives you way too much trouble, really don't even worry about getting the part off the turbo. You can pull the turbo out with the top part still on the turbo, but you're gonna have to just like feed this up. I've done it multiple times. It's not too bad. Having a second person helps a ton, so that one person can just pull the turbo out and the second person can like feed this around all the other shit up in here. It's an option for you if you're having too much trouble getting the line off right now. And honestly, if it takes you any more than like 20 minutes, I would just do it that way. So I'm gonna get the coolant supply line, which is at the back of the turbo. It's kind of hard to get to with the oil supply on there. You have to kind of push it to the side to get the socket on. But I was able to get it right there. And I'm barely gonna have enough room to get a wrench on there. Ratchet. It's way too hard to do with one hand, so I'm gonna have to put the camera down. Oh! I just like punched the drive shaft in my hand. I can hear the coolant dripping already. Oh yeah. A lot of coolant dripping right now. And it's barely catching it. Yeah, there's a ton of coolant. My camera's about to die, so you're not gonna be able to see all of this. So that was the coolant supply. I'm gonna remove the coolant drain line now. So the coolant drain line comes from the the front side of the turbo that's closest to the block, the side of the turbo that's closest to the block. You can't access that while it's on the car. You wouldn't be able to get your hand over there, but the line comes up over here on the side of the engine, and then it clamps right here. Clamps right here to this hard line. Here I have that clamp off, and I was trying to get in there with a screwdriver, and I scratched that up a lot. It's not going to be a problem, but what I could have done is just pulled it like this and then wiggle it back and forth. There we go. Actually, no coolant came out of that at all. Just pull that line up here so that you can get the turbo out without it getting caught on everything. So we now have the coolant drain disconnected up here. That one's gonna be staying on the turbo. We have the coolant supply completely taken off right back here. Well, not completely taken off. It's still on the block, but it's taken off from the turbo. Then we have this oil supply line. That's taken off from the turbo and just pulled out of the way. That the block side still stays on. Oil drain is completely taken off of the car. There's a bracket, a little like bracket down here right underneath the turbo. Let's see if I can get it on camera. There's a 13mm head on a bolt. It's directly below the turbo here. It's on the exhaust housing. Like the exhaust housing goes into the bracket, and then there's a long 13mm bolt that you have to take out. It's really long. That's a little picture of it right there. There's a bolt that goes through there, so that's the next step, and after that, the turbo could technically be removed once you take the exhaust manifold bolts out, but you're not gonna have clearance until you take this windshield cowl off and the firewall. This is one of the most annoying bolts because it's so long and you have a very limited range of motion here. I've literally been doing this for over 10 minutes. Finally got the fucker out. The last few steps now, so I'm just gonna take this guy off and then pull the windshield cowl off. You will have to take your windshield wipers off first. Mine are off. Honestly, it can be difficult. One of mine always comes off really easily, and then the other one will get stuck. So mine are still off from the last time I did this because I didn't want to have to do this again. As you can see, there's a divot mark in the middle of the gear because I had to use a gear puller to get the wiper off. So I had to use a gear puller both times, but really what you should only have to do is just pop the cap off, take the tiny little bolt out, and then just wiggle it back and forth, and it should just come out. It might be easier to have your wipers in service mode, but yeah. I've just been using Rain-X since the last time I did this. This will kind of pull away right here, like that. Just going from one side to the other. And then you can just pull it out. You're gonna want these foam pieces out first though. And now this top part of the firewall needs to be removed. There's just there's one bolt on each side. So there's one right here. And then on the other side, there's one right here. And this one has like a stud. So this one is a stud, this one's just a nut. And then over here, it's a bolt. And these should be 10 millimeters. My neighbors just recently got a new puppy. And the thing keeps running into other people's yards, and instead of just picking it up and bringing it back to her house, she just keeps chasing it and says, "Come here, come here." That thing is like in 3 yards over. She's like running through everyone's yards. Shit is hilarious. Just coming back over here. Okay, yeah, so it's a 10 millimeter. Alright, so now that I got those two off, just gonna get that big fat wiring harness out of there. And then you can pull the firewall up and out. There we go. We just have to remove these 5 guys up here. Let's see if I can get that. Yep, right there. So there's those 5 nuts that go into those studs. So once I get those 5 nuts off, I can pull the turbo out and we're done. I now have all 5 of those turbo stud nuts off, all the exhaust manifold studs. So everything should be live in here now. Just have to try to wiggle it out of that bracket down there and off of the studs, and I can pull it right out. Okay, I have it lifted up a little bit and then pulled out, so it's a lot more live now. It's just kind of sitting in the bracket, but I should be able to just wiggle this out. There we go. Something's stuck down there still, but you can usually just grab this and rotate it up this way. Pull this side up first and turn it up on its side. The only thing that was slightly in the way was this line right here. A couple of the lines were just in the way a little bit. Should be plenty of room here. Alright, here we go. Okay, here we go. So we're done. Got Got the Wastegate Actuator right here. Here's the Wastegate hat. Turbine wheel. Check for some play in there. Only a little bit of play. I wouldn't think that's bad. The N75 valve right here. You can see how that reads boost pressure from right here. Here it can come over to the actuator, and right here it can recirculate air back into the intake. And there's the intake. And here is the coolant drain line. So as you can see, you cannot access this once it's on the car. So that's one of the first things you have to do when you're putting this back in. Now you have to have this installed before you put the turbo back in the car. Another thing that you probably should just install before you put it in the car is this oil drain line, because as you saw, it's an absolute pain in the ass getting to those screws once the turbo's already on the car. So what I did was I just put that on first, and then I put the whole thing in the car, and I didn't have to worry about it. So as you put the turbo in the car, you have to, maneuver that line around everything. So having a second person underneath the car helps out a lot. But that wraps it up. In the next video, I'm going to continue trying to take the head off. The next stuff I'm going to be doing is the front side. So I'm going to be taking the intake manifold off. Hopefully this video helps some of you, and hopefully you guys continue watching. Also, if you're not going to have the turbo back on for a while, I recommend putting this windshield cowl back on, because otherwise you're going to have to worry about all of your electronics over here getting wet. Thanks for watching, guys.